Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to travel back more than 750 years to look at a single book, Roger Bacon's Opus Majus. This wasn't just any book. It was a radical document that basically laid out the blueprint for modern science, centuries ahead of its time. So our first big question is this: how did a Franciscan monk living in the 1200s manage to come up with the very foundations of the scientific method? We're talking about a man of faith who somehow paved the way for an age of reason. And that leads to the second, more tragic question. Why was this genius, who honestly believed his work would strengthen the church, condemned and silenced by that very same institution? It's a story full of irony. Okay, to really get how revolutionary Bacon was, we first need to understand the world he was pushing against. This was a time when authority, not evidence, was king. The 13th century was dominated by what's called scholasticism. You can think of it as a great hall of mirrors. Scholars would debate endlessly, but their arguments were based on a few old texts, mostly flawed Latin translations of Aristotle and the Bible. Bacon saw right through it. He called it ignorance cloaked as wisdom and declared war on what he called the conceit of knowledge. Right. Bacon basically wanted to smash all of those mirrors and throw open a window to the real world. He famously said that he learned more from talking to uneducated, everyday people than from all his famous professors combined. For him, experience was the real teacher. And Bacon was known for his wit, even as a young man. He wasn't afraid to use it either, not even in front of the king. This little story from the 1230s is a perfect example. This is just brilliant. The bishop's name, Pierre de Roquet, literally translates from French as stones and rocks. So it was this incredibly clever pun, but it was more than that. It was Bacon's whole philosophy in a nutshell, cutting through the abstract talk to get to what's real and tangible. For a sailor, the real danger isn't politics, it's hitting the rock. So, as you can imagine, by constantly challenging the establishment, Bacon made plenty of enemies. But he also caught the attention of a very, very powerful and secret admirer. And this is where the story takes a wild turn. A cardinal who had heard about Bacon's ideas suddenly becomes Pope Clement IV. And in 1266, the Pope sends Bacon a secret message. He wants to see Bacon's work. And get this, the Pope's order meant Bacon had to go against the rules of his own Franciscan order, which had banned him from writing anything without permission. So Bacon gets to work, and he works like a man possessed. In just over a year, he doesn't write one book, he produces 3 massive works. The main one, the Opus Majus, wasn't just a dense academic text. He called it a persuasio, a work of persuasion, designed for the busiest and most important man in the world. So let's talk about the Opus Majus. This wasn't just a book, it was a manifesto. A complete blueprint for a new way of discovering the secrets of the universe. In it, Bacon laid out 3 essential keys to unlock true wisdom. First, you had to master the original languages, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, to get past all those bad translations. Second, you had to master mathematics, which he called the alphabet of philosophy. And third, and this was the game changer, you had to embrace experimental science. He called experimental science the queen of all sciences. For him, it was the final judge, the ultimate arbiter of truth. He said it had 3 incredible powers. It verifies what other sciences conclude, it discovers brand new truths they could never find on their own, and most excitingly, it lets us investigate the deep secrets of nature, opening up whole new areas of knowledge. So Bacon sends this masterpiece off to Rome. He's hoping this is it, the start of a new age of learning. But instead, a cruel twist of fate was about to bring it all crashing down. Unbelievably, just a year after Bacon sent his work, Pope Clement IV died. Suddenly, Bacon's one powerful protector was gone. And all those enemies he had made over the years, they were now in a position to do something about it. The backlash was pretty much inevitable. For 9 years, things were quiet. Tense, but quiet. But in 1277, the other shoe finally dropped. He was summoned by his own Franciscan order and condemned for certain suspected novelties. Think about that phrase, not for heresy, but for new ideas. Just like Galileo centuries later, he was silenced for daring to suggest a new way of seeing the world. He was thrown in prison for over a decade. So they locked him away, but of course, you can't really imprison an idea. Bacon's work was like seeds planted in the ground, just waiting for the right conditions to finally sprout. And we can actually trace that influence over the centuries, even if he didn't always get the credit. For example, his work on calendar reform was picked up by a scholar who then went on to urge a young Copernicus to tackle the problem. And his focus on experiment, which he shared with thinkers like Peter Peregrinus, created a direct line to William Gilbert's foundational work on magnetism in 1600. The echoes were there. Okay, so what can we as science professionals today take away from all this? There are 3 really powerful, actionable points. First, question the source. Always ask if your data, your foundational papers, are the modern equivalent of a flawed translation. Second, embrace interdisciplinarity. Bacon mixed language, math, and optics. Real innovation often happens at the messy intersection of different fields. And third, champion the experiment. No matter how beautiful your theory is, evidence has the final say. If you want a really simple way to remember his method, something you can share with your colleagues, it's just 3 words: read, calculate, test. Read the original sources, calculate with mathematical rigor, and then test your conclusions with real-world experiments. Read, calculate, test. So, to sum it all up, Roger Bacon was a man completely ahead of his time, a true scientific visionary whose ideas were so radical that his own world saw them as dangerous. He was, in a very real sense, a martyr for the cause of empirical truth. And his call to challenge authority and always seek evidence is just as urgent today as it was 750 years ago. So we'll leave you with a challenge. What are the flawed translations in your field? What accepted ideas are just sitting there, waiting for someone with Bacon's spirit to finally put them to the test? This explainer is based on the Opus Majus of Roger Bacon, from the 1900 translation by John Henry Bridges. Links to the bibliography are in the description below. Disclaimer and bibliography in the description.